Deicide has been a topic that Genshin Impact's story has toyed with in the past. There was a question in the wee old days of Inazuma's Archon quest that was on everyone's mind as Raiden Shogun herself became the enemy. Can you kill one of the seven? The answer to that one is a resounding yes. It's possible considering that while they're divine, they have varying levels of resilience and aren't actually invulnerable. It won't be easy, but it's happened. But the better question is, should you kill one of the seven? If you notice in Genshin's story, the citizens of Teyvat still hold their god to a regal respect even if they're not exactly subscribed to the idea of divine rulership. The people of Inazuma, for example, never wanted to kill their god. The Fatui aren't even planning to kill any of the Archons despite their seeming want for total control. The scholars of Sumeru opted to seal Boer, and the people of Fontaine's trial was never meant to be for Fossilor's execution. So in universe, it seems that everyone has an idea that if you kill a god, especially an Archon, you're going to face severe consequences. So I want to theorize, what are those consequences? Let's speculate on what happens to the people of Teyvat if one of their Archons are killed, either by natural means or by mankind's hand. Disclaimer, this video is just theory and no Ventis were harmed in the making of this video. So let's begin with what we know in the lore. I want to preface that this video is under the assumption that one of the seven nations kills their Archon, similar to what happened with Havria. By a mysterious weapon or cursed knowledge, who knows? So let's begin with the history of god deaths and killing. Number 1. There's an unknown divine fate in Genshin that's making sure one of the 7, well, 6, seats of the Archons are filled. If you notice with Archon deaths in the past, there is hardly a time where there is no ruling Archon in one of the 7 nations. When Makoto died, A was immediately the successor. Fossilor was Ajaria's successor, Morax was never technically killed, and Boer technically had a reincarnation. The point is that there hasn't been a recorded moment in history after the Archon War where one of the 7 nations didn't have an Archon that was available to take up the position. Currently, though, there hasn't been much information that disproves this cycle, just the hints of it throughout history. However, it is notable that there isn't any hard evidence for this one either, just an interesting speculation about how Archonhood works. Number 2. A god's death can have lingering effects on Teyvat regardless of their power. Gods are divine elemental creatures, and the death of a god expunges that elemental power outward with a massive burst. Zhongli said that regardless of how weak the god is, the power that flows forth is still more than a mortal's capacity to handle. Havria's death in the Archon War caused her power to turn her citizens into salt statues. However, a god's death can also have lasting effects on the environment that are so potent that it requires intervention from another divine power. Orobachi's Tatsugami has continuously plagued Inazuma's islands and have caused irreparable damage to the people and the environment with corrupting illnesses, continuous lightning storms, and horrible withering. It was only when A intervened with her wards, or when the travelers successfully reactivated those wards, that it was properly cleansed or subdued. The magnitude of what happens when a god dies is a case-by-case basis though, in terms of destruction. Egeria, the original Hydro-Archon's death, for example, was only described as her body turning into the pure, primordial waters of the Amrita. It is also unknown if Makoto's death also set off an entire nuke during the apex of the siege in Khaenri'ah. Number 3. Gods' deaths post-Archon War were done by sealing them to mitigate the potential negative effects that they can have on the people around them. Most of the time, when a god passes away, we see them depicted as either sealed or contained within a statue, a tree, or just removed altogether. Guizhong's death, for example, is depicted like this. We actually don't know the logistics, but considering that she's in a statue, it's probably a good assessment that they did this to the corpse to make sure she doesn't turn everyone else into dust. Number 4. Lingering emotions of hatred or negativity within a god can also transcend death. For example, the gods who fought in Liyue during the Archon War still held contempt and resentment even after their passing, causing several curses, plagues, and even miasma that lingered for thousands of years. The Yaksha's sole purpose was to eradicate the hatred of these fallen gods, yet slowly became corrupted themselves. Conversely, gods can also manifest their spirits into this world post-mortem, such as Andreas. However, there are several hints in the lore that when a god dies, unlike humans who allegedly have souls to pass on to the afterlife, their essence returns to the world. Quite fitting considering that they began as elemental beings. Now, why would humans want to kill an Archon can be complex. This could be out of strong hostile emotions or even out of necessity. Archons aren't morally perfect either, with several disputes between humanity and their god happening over the years. The worst possible outcome for the Fontaine or Inazuma Archon quest was the people actually endeavoring to execute their Archons. But the difference is that unlike the state of Tivat back in the Archon War, where god death simply meant the relocation of citizens or of the land, killing an Archon now would be a clear act of treason against the foundational principles of Tivat, and can even cause a chain of events pertaining to both the Archon's death and humanity's disobedience. So let's entertain the possibilities. What happens to the nation and to the people when they kill their Archon? Number 1. There will be a new replacement god birthed or created if there is no living successor. One theory that I have is humans killing gods could just trigger a natural cycle of rebirth within the context of divine fate. Fates and celestial decrees are eternally binding unless broken by a stronger culmination of power. So even if a god is killed by regular means, a reincarnation process or a rebirth where the task of being the nation's new overseer wouldn't be out of the question, because Celestia still needs a deity to take over the elemental seat. I like this theory the most because it plays into the cosmic constants of Tivat and truly show you the inevitability of Celestia and the Archons as gods. However, the next possibility is that the nation is simply godless, with no available successors to the throne. This has several implications. A godless nation under the decree of the Seven plays a whole different implication versus the ancient civilizations we have seen before, like Salvindignir or Conria. The key difference is that ancient civilizations had a culture, or even a verdict, of being removed from the land of the Seven, or faced horrible fates that eventually cursed their entire civilization permanently. One example is Conria. While it resides in the area of Sumeru, Conrians have to live underground and have never been a part of the Seven Nations. The difference is that if the Seven Nations kill their Archon, they're removing themselves from the jurisdiction of Celestia, which mandated after the Archon War that the land was to be divided amongst the victors of the 7 seats. What citizens are doing right now is high treason. The only exception to this so far is Fontaine and Neuvillette. However, they're a different case altogether. Neuvillette's coming to power wasn't just because of Fossilor's execution, but also because the divine seat connected to the hydropower entirely has been removed. Logistically, Fontaine is no longer a nation under the Seven and has technically been removed from Celestia's divine decree of having one of the divine seats govern them. However, if a nation kills its Archon and becomes Archonless without removing the seat itself, it's going to have a lot of implications. This could honestly just affect the general safety of the nation. We don't know to what extent an Archon's presence protects their nation just by simply being there, but Archons are the connection of humans to Celestia. They have access to powers that are beyond the strongest of illuminated beasts or mystical creatures. Without them, the 7 nations are without their primary protector against possible threats. So an Archonless nation is without guidance and a direct channel to Celestia. Number 3. Whatever the god was providing to the people will cease. While a smaller feature of their Archonhood is the resources that they can provide to their people, the death of an Archon could also imply the removal of the resources or restrictions they're currently facilitating. One example is if Zhongli still had the Gnosis during death, Morta production could still cease without the Gnosis having a user. Other possibilities would be Kusanali's overseeing of the Irminsul having unknown repercussions should she die. However, on a more personal scale, this has a lot of implications for how visions are given. We don't know the complete gist of how vision distribution works, and there's even been slight contradictions as to how visions are given to the Allogenes. On one hand, Neuvillette's character stories state that they're given by the 7 when they hear the people's wishes. However, A herself seems to be confused as to why there are no electrovisions that were going out during the Inazuma rebellions. There's also strong evidence that vision distribution is connected to the 7 thrones of the element itself rather than the Archons. But the question is, if the god is dead and there's no sovereign to fill up the throne, is that element's vision just straight up gone? An interesting theory. Number 4. The nation will just straight up not exist. Archon death, with or without the Gnosis, could still wipe out an entire city. If this was actually Morax's corpse upon his death, the entirety of Liyue Harbor could have just been wiped off the map. Of course, some gods are well past their prime or even less developed, but that doesn't stop the possibility that the moment the Archon's physical vessel is shattered, it's just over. The elemental burst itself would be enough to just kill everyone. And even without the initial burst, an Archon's death could absolutely alter the nation's ecosystem and environment. Each Archon is associated with a certain element, and if that elemental energy amplifies without a vessel, we're seeing eternal storms in Mondstadt or Inazuma, or even a complete overgrowth in Sumeru. Number 5. Celestia will intervene. One of my personal fears for Fontaine is Fossilor's plan of thwarting the divine prophecy, and the delegation of the throne over to Neuvillette could ultimately spell Fontaine's downfall when Celestia finds out that Fossilor relinquished authority to a sovereign, not only abandoning her position, but also giving it to a previous enemy of the gods. It's even worse if humanity has decided to counter divine law with high treason. Historical evidence and devout proof that mortal arrogation and treason have been punished severely by the gods with nation-breaking force. Smaller acts of rebellion or even knowing forbidden pieces of information can have damning consequences like banishment or extinction, so killing a god could just mean an entire nail upon everyone. This also brings back the visions discussion. If Celestia realizes that visions aren't being distributed and the flow of power between gods and humans has been interrupted, I'm sure they'll put their foot down. Number 6. Humanity will elect a new religious figure. This one is an interesting perspective into the moral dilemma of complete free will versus the need for structure and higher level of stability by following a greater power. It's the same concept as our modern-day motivations for the establishment of religion. And in Tevat, religion and cultures pertaining to religion have been so intertwined in how the Seven Nations build their events and rituals. Even the ancient civilizations worshipped a political figure or a pseudo-god. Killing an Archon would be a good way of ushering a new religious decree by humanity, for whatever reason. Number 7. Humanity will be left alone, with no permanent repercussions for the death of the Archon. There's no current evidence that the heavenly principles of Celestia are active in governing the happenings in Tevat. Nahida also notes that they've been silent ever since the Cataclysm, so the killing of an Archon, similar to Fossilor's execution, could go unnoticed for a longer period of time. Except for the potentially nation-ending disaster of an explosion, an Archon's death going unnoticed could definitely spark a new era of independence for the Seven Nations. So that's it for me, a more unhinged topic to get back into the groove of things, but this video was honestly just inspired by me thinking about the Inazuma Arcade Quest. Anyway, my name is Aster, and before we end this, I would just like to say that I am currently revamping the memberships or the wind wheels. So basically, I had a really big, deep thought about what I wanted to do for this channel, and one of them was I wanted to improve certain things or give you guys more content. And obviously, being a member in this channel is completely optional. Please do not feel obligated to do this. Obviously, I'm not going to be touching any of the content that I have planned for you guys for the main channel, but I do also want to give extra for those that, paid extra. Anyway, that's it, honestly. Thank you all so much for chilling with me. Bye-bye!